When I came to a rally here against illegal immigration, I didn't expect to hear so many people kind of critical of Donald Trump.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Right?
Yeah.
And so, especially your perspective, it sounded like was maybe kind of in the middle of relative to the people here. I guess I'd love to hear from you. Where do you see Trump on, especially this issue of illegal immigration now?
I think that Ann Coulter is largely correct that he has failed to do what he said he's going to do, and people want to say it's the fault of Congress, and certainly they're not helping anything. But as I pointed out in my speech, there's things that he can do as commander-in-chief he's just not doing, and that's no one's fault other than himself. I mean, he is the commander-in-chief. He could deploy the U.S. military on the border, as Wilson did back in 1916 when Pancho Villa raided across the border. Or he could also just call the National Guard units of each state in federal service and put them on the border. He hasn't done those two things. Well, they're very crystal clear. In fact, the National Guard, nationalization would be I would call it very uncontroversial. Other presidents have called the National Guard in the federal service for all kinds of reasons. He could certainly do that right now. So, and he hasn't done it yet. So, why not?
What do you sort of think of the people who are coming out here saying, some of these people are saying, I'm going to write in Ann Coulter, for example,
right,
and that they're not actually willing to vote for Trump again?
Well, because they're upset, because they believe that he, like I said, that he has not done what he said he's going to do. And they're correct. So I want to give him a chance. I think he still can. But, after a while it's almost like back in the Soviet Union, someone be in the gulag and they'd say, if only Stalin knew, if only Stalin realized that an innocent man is here. I just got to get the message to Stalin. It's kind of like that. It's like Trump, if only Trump knew what his powers are. How could he not know? He's the commander-in-chief. He has the friggin' nuclear football. I think he knows what his powers as commander-in-chief are. I think he's allowing himself to put his political campaign first. I think that's a mistake, and it's also a violation of his oath.
And what do you sort of see as the role of the citizen militia as something you were kind of bringing up, the idea of non-state actors or former state actors?
Well, no, you would be called in the federal service. What I said is he could call us up. Federal law, still to this day, defines a militia as both the organized and the unorganized militia. Organized being the National Guard, unorganized being everybody else between ages 17 and 45. As I pointed out, for us veterans, it goes to 65. What I would say is he would call us into formal service, federal service, then we wouldn't be non-state actors, we'd be state actors under the President of the United States. It'd be better if we were formed into militias in our states, but they've kind of let that atrophy and die away. All you have left is the National Guard. We're just not big enough. That's the problem with the National Guard. I've been on the border is 3,000 miles long. To secure that border, even if you had a wall all the way across it, someone's got to patrol that barrier. And right now, the Border Patrol is only 21,000 men and women. There's just not enough of them to do the job. So really, it takes the military. At this point right now, there's no other way to secure the border other than the U.S. military and National Guard, or maybe calling us up as a militia. You need men. You need boots on the ground.
What do you sort of think of? It's an interesting distinction for sure. What do you think of the groups that are currently purely citizen militias that are patrolling?
Well, we did it. We don't call ourselves a militia because I believe a militia should be under the authority of the state and a formal government body. Like you can't call yourself a posse unless the sheriff establishes the posse. So you can't have a private posse. It makes no sense. So I agree with Dr. Edwin Vieira that a militia is a state entity under the command of the governor unless called in the federal service. But as non-militia volunteers, we were in Eagle Pass. We also did an operation in California on the border. It's disheartening because you go down there and you don't feel like you're doing a whole lot because all you're doing is watching the Border Patrol process people who claim to be asylum seekers. And that's the other thing that Trump's not doing. He could simply just turn them back to Mexico, or if there's concerns for their safety, he could put them on a military base and hold them there. And they could have a choice: stay on the military base or go back to Mexico. That's what I think should be done. I think it's wrong to put them loose inside the United States. Most of them don't show up for their asylum hearing; they just disappear. So it makes no sense to me.
So I'm sure there are some people who probably support you watching this, and there are probably some people who disagree on from two different directions. So my guess is there are some people saying, I feel like Trump's doing everything he can, and everybody else is kind of the issue. First, if you could respond to that likely viewer, the hardcore MAGA supporter.
Like I said, there's things that he can do as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces he's just not doing. He could call the National Guardians in the federal service. He's not doing that. They pointed out he could start with New Mexico's National Guard, which were pulled off the border in January by the new Democratic governor. He could just federalize them and put them right back on the border. Hasn't done that. Why not? You can't blame Congress for that. You can't blame the courts for that. It's the commander-in-chief's responsibility. It's on him alone. Same with the military. He could deploy. Look, Joint Task Force 6 back in 91 to 93 was the joint task force of the National Guard, U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Army troops, and the Border Patrol in the Boot Heel down in Hidalgo County, New Mexico. They sealed the border. The cartels couldn't bring anything across at all. It was effective. Why is he not doing that across the entire border? He could.
The other type of dissenter I'm sure is going to be watching this are progressives, are people who are somewhere on the left and more or less disagree with the Trump agenda and your agenda. What would sort of be your response to that kind of person?
Every country in the world has borders. So, and every country in the world protects their borders. And in our country, we have a right to self-determination, you have a right to vote. And under our Constitution, and all state constitutions in particular, you can't vote if you're a non-citizen. Problem is, we know there are non-citizens that are voting. It's happened in New Mexico, it happened in Texas, it's happened in California. It disenfranchises an actual American citizen to have somebody who's not authorized by law to vote. So that right there is a disenfranchisement of American citizens. Why would you be in favor of that?
Great, thank you. I really appreciate you talking to me.